Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us in a continued wild political world. Each and every week, a lot going on in provincial politics because of a lot of international and national politics as well. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about BC Green leader Sonia Furstenau's resignation, and also take a look once again at the Trump tariff threat impact on British Columbia politics. Thank you to Uber for sponsoring the show, and thank you to our friends at HeliJet as well. Let's bring in the panel. Jeff Ferrier, Allie Blades, Jillian Oliver here. You know them each and every week, the Pod Squad. Thank you for helping us break down BC politics. Normally, we might be starting with Donald Trump, but we're recording this on a Friday. It's a fast-moving situation. He's threatened tariffs on Saturday. We're going to move that down a little bit and talk about it later in the show, and instead talk about Sonia Furstenau's resignation as BC Green leader and her legacy and impact on that party after 7 years in the legislature, and then also the leadership race now that the Greens have to go under, and some weird sort of quirky ness about that. So, Jillian, you did work with Sonia Furstenau. You ran her leadership campaign. You've grown to know her over the years. Tell me a bit about what you think her legacy is going to be on BC politics as she steps down as leader.
I think that she will be known as, like, first and foremost for her really strong election performances under two really difficult cycles for the Greens, for any third party. The first one was in 2020 in COVID, where, you know, the NDP under John Horgan was just this unstoppable force. She managed to sort of, you know, save their two seats despite having only been elected leader 6 days prior to the snap election being called. And then in this most recent cycle with the rise of the Conservatives and the polarization, kind of still pushing through and managing to hold on to two seats, including their first off the island, which was a big deal for them. And I think, you know, just cementing for the Greens a very clear, distinct voice that was honest, that really was grounded in values, and sort of, you know, really kind of solidifying that trust that a lot of people have in the party, to be that kind of moderating voice that adds a moderating tone and a sort of different kind of tenor to the debate in the legislature, when we in BC have often tended towards that polarization between the two big parties. As well as, I think, you know, she has shown that a third party MLA and leader can get tangible wins even when they are not in government directly. Right off the bat, she got her first win with professional reliance reform. That's sort of changing the way that land use decisions are made. That was what she ran on in 2017, her reason for wanting to become an MLA. And then just continued that with pushing for changes to family doctors, to MCFD in her first term. And now with the new agreement with NDP, you know, there's going to be changes that happen in the next 4 years that are her ideas, having psychologists cover under MSP, which I understand that works underway, community health centers, expanding transit. So real tangible things that is rare for third parties to say that they really were able to drive into reality.
It didn't seem, Jillian, just to stay with you for a second, it didn't seem tenable for her to sort of remain leader for very long when she didn't win a seat in the legislature, I think. Although, I don't know, would that have worked for her to kind of keep going, do you think?
I think that she would have needed to have a plan to try to obtain a seat. And it, you know, wasn't really clear what that would be. And I think it would be, you know, a really big undertaking for her to take on at this point, when she'd already been in elected politics for a decade. And, you know, she really talked about the reasons for this being a clear time for her to sort of leave politics to spend more time with her family. And I think when she was kind of staring down those two options, the choice was clear. Because, yeah, I mean, I think as leader, you can kind of operate effectively without a seat for a while, but it becomes this nagging question, and you at least need to have a plan for it.
Yeah, she did seem relieved to be leaving too. That sense sometimes when you watch politicians who've spent a few terms, they finally decided to leave, and it's just like the weight has lifted off of them. So that was kind of neat to see as well. Allie, Sonia Furstenau did get questions in her press conference about, what does this leave for the future of the Greens? Have they plateaued? Are they stalled? Are they stuck? Is there, a couple of elections where I agree with Jillian, like Furstenau kind of saved the Greens with her strong debate performances, but the party, didn't gain any more seats, kind of thing. So how does that influence her legacy and what the party does now, do you think?
I'm highly confused about the decisions that Sonia Furstenau has made. Let's start with the fact that she decided during the election that she was going to move ridings as well, which I still don't understand. I had my speculations that she did it as a result of making sure that she had a backdrop of a more urban center to talk about pressing issues like housing. Who knows if that was the case? And so this goes back to that point of what are the political decisions that she's making that got her to this point. I'm even more confused by there are two paths that a leader could take here. One in which you're in the legislature and you have you have that platform to be able to hold the government and opposition accountable and have that media exposure, which is super beneficial. And in this case, the two Greens have also said, the two Green MLAs have said that they don't want it because of a commitment to community service, and that they are leaving some of the more political aspects of their job to the leader. Don't understand it when your job is inherently political, so you can't really use that as an excuse. And so then the other path is that this new leader, which is likely going to be someone from the outside, unless Jeremy Valeriot decides to change his tune and maybe take the interim position and turn it into a permanent one. And I hope that the people in his network do try to convince him to do that, because I think it's actually the smarter move politically and strategically. So, okay, so then let's say that you're going to then have a leader on the outside. Well, then the path forward politically is that person's going to be campaigning on your behalf and fundraising and recruiting candidates, which is not a bad thing. But the challenge with that is that there's a potential for there to not be cohesion between what's happening in question period and what's happening on the political landscape outside. And then there could be confusion as to who the main spokesperson is for the Green Party. Is it the leader who's campaigning, or the MLAs who are fighting certain issues and policies in the legislature? And so the point here is you have to go down one path or the other. But I think that Jeremy Valeriot really should consider the permanent position because it could be the most beneficial thing to happen to the Greens.
Yeah, I agree. I was very surprised, Jeff, that neither of the Green MLAs wanted the job, which you sort of thought at some point during the process of running for the Greens, realizing it's a small party, that its future was tenuous. You might have to be leader. I'm not totally sure I understand it. Allie made a lot of good points there. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the Greens do with their leadership. I know she didn't mention Rob Botterill. I read in the media that he's busy for the next 8 years. So I guess that means that elections are canceled in Saanich North and the islands, so we can all just tend to our wild mushrooms and keeping the deer out of our flowers. Look, Sonia resigning, it's a moment for some honest reflection. On the one side, public service is hard, and for all the political differences that people may have with Sonia, she brought conviction, she brought decency to her work. She held government accountable in a whole bunch of areas and that she cared deeply about, and Jillian's talked about those. She helped bring important issues to the forefront, the climate crisis, most importantly, and that deserves our respect and our gratitude. But it's also fair to acknowledge that the Greens failed to grow under her tenure. They lost ground in the last election by losing their leader. And now the party's in a difficult place. Their finances are a bit of a mess. Their MLAs don't want the leadership, and there's no clear path for them to expand their base or their influence. Close on a positive, though. I think they call this the sandwich style of feedback. Ending her time as leader, getting a deal with the NDP to advance green policies is something that one might not have expected someone in her situation to be able to pull off, and she did. And I think it's a good way for her to end her time and with a deal that's going to deliver some positive results, which is all that a good leader should want to do, and that's what she's ended her career in the legislature doing.
Just to end this back with you, Jillian, what do you think of the two MLAs not wanting to be leader and the pros and cons or paths that, as Allie sort of mentioned, that puts the party down?
Yeah, I think I think the risks that Allie talked about are real, and we've seen that in any leadership race, really. It opens it up to someone with a very different vision and a new vision. I mean, that's what leadership races are about renewal. So it's going to be really interesting to see who steps forward and what that debate looks like. I mean, I think there are things the party can do to sort of mitigate it, obviously through vetting if it's somebody with serious issues, but also through recruitment. And I think that is something that they're going to have to do, is really think about, what are the most important things that they need in a leader going forward, and perhaps even having the MLAs be part of that process. Valerian is going to be the interim leader, so I expect that whether or not he changes his mind, he still will be part of that process. So I think, it's something they really have to take seriously and not kind of just let it get away from them. But having a leader outside of caucus is also an opportunity, because they can spend all of their time to building the party. I think that if you look at the most recent election cycle, candidate recruitment was a huge kind of a weakness for the Greens in the last election. They didn't nominate a full slate. I think they could have nominated better, high quality candidates in key ridings that could have served them better and helped keep those numbers up for them. And so I think, they have a little bit of work to do on the organizational side. Perhaps having just two MLAs in the legislature, one of them who is a leader and really dedicated and focused to her legislative work, might have had an impact on that not as much attention being paid to that kind of organizational stuff.
It gives me one more question then, Allie, to you. You've got a lot of sort of modern campaign experience. And I hypothesized in a column this week that someone who was really digitally savvy and motivated and smart, like we saw in the NDP leadership race and even in the BC Liberal leadership race, could kind of come in out of nowhere and make some trouble in the Green leadership race by mass membership signing up, depending on how the rules are played out. Is that a risk, do you think, in this sort of day and age, to have a race wide open like this, that it could go in a direction that the party and its MLAs and its establishment aren't looking for?
It's a foundational leadership question, and I think Jillian was kind of mentioning a little bit of this, of the direction of a new leader that comes in, and they essentially, for lack of a better word, hijack everything else, and that's their party. They're the boss, and they constitutionally within each party give them the right to do all of that fun stuff. You could see this as an opportunity to widen the scope of who you're going to attract with this new leader, or you can double down on the core values of the party. The trends internationally have been to double down on the core values of the party, and I think that the Greens could benefit from that as well. So whoever's thinking about maybe putting their hat or their name in the hat, that would be a path towards victory, is to really identify who the party is and double down on the traditional values of the party, rather than going into this space of this mythical centrist voter that we kept talking about during the provincial election, and that this new person potentially could recruit and persuade undecided voters and the centrist voters to come to the Greens. Voters are traditionally now in a space of, I want to understand what I'm voting for and why I'm going to take out a membership, which leadership races would have to do. And that is more persuasive if they have that we're going to save the environment, and we're going to think about green ideas, and maybe with this a dynamic thing like we're going to stop the creation of these new oil and gas facilities, perhaps, the core of what the Green Party had traditionally been.
Yeah, it would be. You're right. I think there's less room for the Greens in the center than any other party. They're more defined by being another option for people that exist in their own space. Jeff, let's go to you on Trump. With the proviso, again, we are recording this on January 31st, the Friday. Trump has said tariffs could be coming on the Saturday. We don't know in what scope. Everything is moving, shifting as we go. But so we're going to kind of look more at where we've been in the last week. The NDP response to this: war room, cabinet committees, task force, a call to Ottawa to be funding social programs like the pandemic and business programs to help cover what might be the economic impact here, and kind of a refusal from the premier to do Ottawa's job on securing the borders. He talked a bit about that, saying they should do it, but he's not going to create his own provincial police force. What do you make of that? The stance from the NDP and some of the other kind of discussion over the last week on this issue?
Yeah, so my sense of the situation now is what British Columbians want is unity, leaders who are going to put partisanship aside and stand together against what I think is the biggest economic threat the province has faced, certainly in my lifetime. When you look at David Eby's response, I think he's stepping up, he's standing strong, he's making it clear that if U.S. hits us with tariffs, we'll fire back dollar for dollar. He's sending a message to American politicians and businesses that if you hurt us, we're going to make you feel it too. He's shutting down Trump on that absurd 51st state talk, and he's working behind the scenes with Ottawa. Right? There's, in addition to everything you've described in terms of his public positioning, which is aiming at creating leverage for BC and Canada in negotiations with Trump. Officials are working behind the scenes to try and solve some of these issues. BC's on board with Ottawa's $1.3 billion plan to improve border security. So that's my view. That's leadership, and that's how you protect BC workers. And then you've got John Rustad, who, instead of treating this like the serious threat it is, he's putting out the weirdest videos that you've ever seen that look like they were done by people drinking too much energy drink and Costco chickens. A nuclear theme. It's hard to understand. But his main message is that we should just kind of appease the bully and hope for the best. And, it's like if Rustad had been governor of the planet Alderaan, staring down the Death Star, he'd have sent Darth Vader a fruit basket and a polite request for constructive dialogue. That's not what is going to work to protect British Columbia. I think.
Didn't Alderaan get destroyed anyways?
No one took a strong position. Perhaps they sent the fruit basket. Perhaps they sent a singing telegram.
It was mainly due to the collapse of the Jedi Order because of Order 33. But anyways, we won't get into that.
Well, this is now we're getting way too.
This is the nerdiest conversation I've ever heard.
What did you think, Jillian, of the conservative ad, which was this old-timey World War II newsreel atomic tariff, sort of pretending it was like the atomic bomb, and then David Eby was ducking and covering? What did you think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit weird, especially that they were like, the point of it was to come out against Eby talking about having support programs for workers. And, the premier did kind of refer to COVID and the supports that government put in place. And, Rustad sort of politicized that aspect of it, I think, trying to use like negative feelings towards COVID, talking about how those programs maybe drove inflation. But I think it's short-sighted. I can't imagine there being low levels of support for hard-hit workers and industries if the tariffs do go ahead. It just seems strange to me. And I think trying to hang the tariffs and Trump imposing them on the BC government, where we're like a small province. Like, we have a hard time even getting Ottawa's attention. Like, you think that the president of the United States is like staying up thinking about David Eby, like, dang him. I think I don't think that a lot of people are going to find that credible. We just were talking about a fundraising email that they sent out, I think, for fundraising for their base. Sure, maybe that's believable, but I think opinions of Trump in Canada are already low. They're going to get lower if this goes ahead. I think they should be really careful about who they're kind of aligning themselves with, and just how out of step with the apparent reality it is.
Yeah, I would have thought, based on the demographics or the regional breakdown of who voted Conservative, that they would be more concerned about the job impacts in the resource industries that they vastly represent compared to the NDP. But the video was weird, I thought. But anyways, Allie, the contrast between the NDP's messaging and the Conservative messaging on Trump, what's standing out for you?
Well, I love that, one, we're talking about the videos. The Conservatives also did this other really great video that highlighted how many days David Eby worked and the NDP government worked. Check that one out too. So shout out to the comms team there. But the fact that we're talking about it, that's a win. What did the NDP do this past month? Okay, the contrast. Let's get.
We don't have enough time in the show, Allie. We don't have enough time in the show for me to go over that.
Alderon.
The contrast here that I think that John Rustad and the Conservatives are trying to make is the serious threat that's coming to BC and what our response has been. And so David Eby put forward this committee of his colleagues, cabinet ministers, all rightfully within the space of their ministry is going to be impacted a lot by the tariffs. But the criticism this week has been, well, then why isn't the Attorney General part of this crew as well? Because if we get back to the basics of it, the tariffs exist because of border protections and our inability to patrol that. And so if we're going to aggressively pursue something that's proactive, then the Attorney General should be part of it. And then my perception is that the grouping of ministers are now on the reactive, but because these tariffs are going to come in to place, well, we need to make sure that we are able to help these various ministries. But yes, I get it. That is the point. This is what we're supposed to be doing, but it doesn't seem like we're fighting enough. And so we're basically just going to take the hit, and our ministers are going to be then equipped enough to be able to respond with, bailouts and money. And then what was the point if we could have fought it at the start of it?
Okay. Thank you to the panel for being here. It's a fluid, changing situation, obviously, but we'll be back with all the latest in BC politics next week here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.